Anna and I had been married for 4 years. The honeymoon phase was long behind us, but I believed we'd already weathered the challenging parts, learning to live together, finding middle ground on disagreements. There was a time when Anna's face would light up the moment I entered the room. We used to have conversations that stretched into the early hours, discussing everything under the sun, but lately our exchanges had become brief and meaningless. She wasn't hostile. We didn't fight, but somehow that felt worse. She seemed indifferent. For several months now, she'd been going out with her friends every Friday evening. Initially, I didn't care. She deserved to unwind after working hard all week. But as time passed, something started to gnaw at me. I wasn't particularly fond of her friends. Two were in an open relationship, and the other pair were recently divorced. I tried to dismiss my concerns, telling myself that their chaotic lives didn't mean Anna would follow the same path. I wanted to believe our relationship was solid, but no matter how hard I tried to push the thoughts away, something didn't feel right. One Friday evening, she headed out around 8 p.m. wearing a form-fitting crimson dress I hadn't seen her wear in years. The sight of her in it made my chest tighten, not from appreciation, but from discomfort. Anna used to dress that way for me when things were better, when she actually valued my opinion. But these days she barely noticed me. I'd attributed it to work pressure, but the persistent feeling in my stomach suggested something else. "You look beautiful," I said, attempting a small smile. She barely looked at me. "Thanks," she replied coldly, grabbing her handbag and heading toward the exit. I watched as she left, feeling the coldness of her indifference settle in my heart. It wasn't just tonight. This had been our reality for months. Nothing I did seemed to matter. When I surprised her with flowers, she would force a smile and mutter, "That's sweet." When I suggested taking her out to eat, she would decline, claiming exhaustion. Movie nights? Even more futile. She would tell me I was only doing these things because she had to ask, but I was genuinely trying to recapture what we once had. I worked tirelessly every day to build the life. She always talked about the getaways, the perfect home, the stable finances. I thought I was doing right by her, but somehow I was always portrayed as the villain. I told myself to stop overthinking. She would return soon. I switched on the television, flipping through channels without really watching. My phone rested in my hands, but I wasn't paying attention to the screen. Every few minutes, I checked the time. Midnight. She was usually home by now, but for some reason she hadn't returned yet. By 1 a.m., I texted her, "Is everything all right?" No answer. By 2 a.m., I tried phoning her. It rang twice before directing me to voicemail. I kept calling, but there was no response. By this point, I wasn't just concerned. I was furious. Where on earth was she? It was nearly 6 in the morning when I finally heard her car pull into our driveway. I remained on the sofa, the television muted, pretending to browse on my phone. The door squeaked open and Anna walked in wearing different clothes. The red dress was nowhere to be seen. Instead, she had on a baggy dark tank top and yoga pants. Clothes that weren't hers. Her makeup was smeared. Her hair was disheveled. And then there was the odor. A combination of perspiration, fragrance, alcohol, and something else. Something unmistakable, a masculine scent. She nervously ran a hand through her messy hair and attempted a casual smile. "Hey." I gazed at her, trying to keep my voice even. "You changed clothes." She blinked, then glanced down at her outfit as if just becoming aware. "Oh, yeah. I spilled something on my dress." She hesitated momentarily, then turned away too quickly, placing her bag down on the counter. I remained silent. I just observed her. She was being dishonest. She busied herself searching through her purse as if looking for something. Then, as if suddenly realizing the time, she let out an exaggerated yawn. "I'm exhausted. I'm going to take a shower and go to bed." She turned toward our bedroom. But I wasn't finished. "Anna." She stopped in her tracks. Slowly, she turned back around. "What?" She stood before me, her expression shifting between defiance and something else. Something akin to guilt, but not quite. Perhaps regret, perhaps embarrassment. I took a measured step forward, my voice low and controlled. "Why didn't you message me or call to let me know you'd be late? That you'd be out all night?" Anna tensed up, her shoulders becoming rigid. "It was a girls' night, Mark. Do I need to report my every move to you?" I released a humorless chuckle. "It's called basic decency and respect, Anna." My voice elevated slightly. "I've been sitting here all night wondering if something happened to you." I stood up, no longer feigning calmness. "Plus, you left here wearing one thing and came back in something completely different. And you smell of—" I trailed off, revulsion rising in my stomach. I couldn't even bring myself to say it. Her face reddened, but she quickly masked it with an expression of arrogance, then anger. Are you implying something? She snapped. Because if you are, just say it outright. I moved closer, my heart racing. Fine, I said, my voice cutting like a blade. Did you sleep with someone else tonight? Anna's gaze met mine, and for a moment, something flickered in her eyes, but then she glanced away. That moment of hesitation lasted only a second, just long enough to confirm my suspicions. She scoffed, shaking her head. You're being absurd. Am I? Your faith in me is so low that you immediately assume the worst. Anna, stop. My voice was rough. I could feel reality warping into something I didn't want to face. Just tell me the truth. Don't make this worse. Silence. Her eyes darted nervously around the room. She was barely maintaining her composure. Then finally she whispered. It was only once. It didn't mean anything. My body went rigid. It felt like someone had knocked the wind out of me. The blood pounded in my ears and my chest constricted. My hands balled into fists at my sides. What? She remained silent. She just stared at the floor, too frightened to look at me. I retreated a step, dragging a hand over my mouth, my mind struggling to comprehend. What the hell prompted this? My voice emerged as a strained whisper. Why would you do this to us? Nothing. No explanation. No justification. Just deafening silence. I exhaled sharply, pacing, trying to contain the fury that was threatening to erupt. I was on the brink of snapping, of yelling, of breaking something. But I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of witnessing my breakdown. I turned to face her. She avoided my gaze. Say something, I demanded. She finally raised her head. I was lonely, she mumbled. I let out a bitter laugh. Lonely? I echoed. I needed something. I needed to feel desired. I looked at her in disbelief. So you went and found someone else to fill that void. Tears formed in her eyes, but I was unmoved. She could cry all she wanted. She wasn't the one who'd been wronged here. You could have talked to me, Anna. You could have voiced your feelings. My voice trembled with frustration. But instead you. I cut myself off, shaking my head. You chose this path. That was it. I was done caring. This had destroyed everything. I released a slow breath and ran a hand down my face. You know what? It's pointless now. Anna flinched as if anticipating what was coming. I'm done with this, I said, my voice now hollow. Empty. We're finished. I want a divorce. That declaration seemed to shatter her. Her eyes widened. Her breath caught. Wait. Please. No. I interrupted, my voice resolute. There's nothing to wait for anymore. She took an unsteady step closer. I wasn't thinking clearly. It was a terrible mistake, I promise. I never intended for it to go this far. I exhaled sharply, my patience waning. Then why did you go through with it? She hesitated. Then, almost inaudibly, she said, the girls said it would teach you a lesson. I stared at her, my stomach churning. What? They said you'd appreciate me more if you thought you might lose me. That maybe you'd finally start paying attention. Her voice quavered. I thought I was doing it to save our marriage. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. And you believe that nonsense? Well, you've certainly got my attention now. Just not in the way you anticipated. She looked at me desperately, tears cascading down her face. Mark, I love you. She moved forward, reaching for me, but I backed away. Don't, I warned, my voice sharp. Don't touch me. Anna was openly sobbing now, but I felt nothing. No compassion. No grief. Just rage and disillusionment. I turned away from her and grabbed my jacket. Where are you going? She asked frantically. Anywhere but here. Please don't leave like this. We can fix this. She pleaded. I grabbed my keys and met her tearful gaze. No, Anna. I'm done. Then I walked out, got into my car and drove away, leaving her standing on the porch weeping in the darkness. The instant I left, I knew there was no going back. Anna had broken something between us that could never be mended. Her words kept echoing in my mind as I drove without direction, trying to comprehend it all. They said it would teach you a lesson. She hadn't merely cheated. She had orchestrated it deliberately with the encouragement of her so-called friends. And what was this lesson? That I should beg for her attention? That I should worship the ground she walked on? That I should value her more? I had exhausted myself trying to make her happy. I had sacrificed time, energy, and resources to create a life with her. And this was her gratitude. The anger burned beneath my skin like a slow, steady flame. I had no desire to return home. So I drove to a nearby hotel, checked in, and locked the door behind me. I fell onto the bed and gazed at the ceiling, my mind still attempting to process everything. It felt surreal, but fatigue overcame me and eventually sleep claimed me. I awoke to daylight filtering through the blinds. My body was sore from the stress of the previous night. For a brief moment, I forgot. Then it all flooded back. I sat up and rubbed my face, exhaling deeply. I needed someone to talk to, so I called my closest friend David and asked him to meet me at a local cafe. "Man, you look terrible," he said as I sat down. I let out a humorless laugh. "Yeah, I know." He didn't press further, just waited patiently. So I recounted everything. By the time I finished, his hands were clutching his cup tightly. "Anna did that? What's wrong with her?" I shook my head. "I don't even care anymore. I just want out of this marriage." David leaned back, exhaling sharply. "I know someone, an excellent divorce attorney. He assisted my colleague when his wife tried to take him for everything." He pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, then slid it across the table toward me. "Call him. He'll ensure you're protected." I looked at the name displayed. Divorce lawyer. I nodded and saved the contact information. "Thanks, I appreciate it." David gave me a firm nod. "Anytime, brother." The following day, I contacted the attorney David had suggested. By that afternoon, I was sitting in his office, initiating divorce proceedings. When Anna received the papers, she became relentless, bombarding me with texts, filling my voicemail. She even showed up at my workplace like some desperate, remorseful spouse trying to win me back. I ignored her completely. At first, her messages read, "Mark, please talk to me." Then they evolved into, "I made a terrible mistake. I'll do anything to make things right." And when I continued to ignore her, her desperation morphed into accusations. "You were never really there for me anyway. Maybe if you had been a more attentive husband, this wouldn't have happened." That one actually made me laugh. Typical pattern. First came the apologies. Then when she realized I wasn't buying her lies, she tried to shift the blame to me. That told me everything I needed to know. In the weeks that followed, rumors began to circulate. Mutual acquaintances informed me that Anna was completely unraveling. She had confided in people about how her so-called friends had pressured her into it, how they convinced her I was neglecting her. The most ironic part? Those same friends deserted her the moment things collapsed. The divorced ones. The ones who encouraged her, saying, "Men never truly value their wives until they believe they're about to lose them." They stopped responding to her calls, and the couple in the open relationship, they began gossiping about her, calling her foolish for throwing away a solid marriage over a meaningless fling. Anna had destroyed her own life for the amusement of people who didn't genuinely care about her. People cautioned me that I'd eventually regret my decision. One day you'll wake up wishing you had given her another chance. That never materialized. If anything, I felt unburdened, more liberated. Because ultimately, I learned one fundamental truth. Some betrayals cut too deeply to ever be forgiven. And Anna had lost the one person who would have never betrayed her trust.